Home Affairs Minister Aaron Motsoaledi is consulting religious and cultural leaders about the development of a new marriage policy. The aim is to close gaps in the current legislation which do not cover Hindu, Muslim and certain customary marriages in African communities. ENCA's Kailihle Kumalo joins me now. You've been following this story very closely, Kailihle. Now, from what we understand, at the moment, there are 3 marriage acts under which South Africans can form a union of some kind. And it is assumed that because there are 3 pieces of legislation, there are some gaps in between.
Well, so enormous gaps, especially because in the very current dispensation we have, so there are cases of discrimination. So, for example, when you look at the case of the transgender community, so if you marry as a male, so then you undergo the process of changing your sex, so you have to remarry in essence to be recognized because we have all these gaps. But also more importantly, it's a long journey for the Home Affairs Department. They are trying so hard to modernize the marriages in South Africa in making sure, for example, that we come up with a minimum age for the marriage. At this point in time, hence you have the case of the underage marriages because there's no specific age, for example, to say you can get married.
Now let's just pause there for a moment, because the issue of underage marriage probably doesn't get the attention that it actually deserves, because at the moment there are a lot of these underage marriages that are taking place and it's covered by law, and surely there are people that need to be protected from that kind of thing.
Well, precisely because it's protected by the customary marriage, but also more importantly, so within the SADC region, Marcel, so you have a protocol around the gender area. So basically that protocol is stipulating that South Africa should really make sure that we bring an end to these marriages where the young people are really used by the old men simply because of the cultural background. So it's going to be a very big job for the Home Affairs Department to try and solicit as much voices as possible from the traditional leaders, from the religious leaders, also so from all these diverse groupings.
Now today or this week, the Home Affairs Minister met with religious leaders. They're very important stakeholders in all of this, because we're talking about the country. 14,000 out of the 16,000 marriage officers come from the religious realm. Do we know what kind of feedback the Home Affairs Minister and his team got from these religious leaders?
So they were very clear to the minister. They were saying they're willing to cooperate with the department. They're very key partners in making sure that marriages are really given the significance that they do deserve. But also more importantly, the minister emphasized the points that the marriage officers from time to time should be equipped, because legislation changes from time to time. So you have a case, for example, of a marriage officer who got a certificate in 1960. They haven't been refreshing themselves. They haven't been equipped. So, I mean, you have all these evolving situations in the country. So that was a point from the side of the minister, saying ideally the new act encompassing all these 3 marriages acts so that we have one single act. But then it's going to be a massive task to try and bring all these diverse groupings, because South Africa is a very complex society.
With a very thick constitution. I mean, I remember over a few years ago there was an issue with when we found out that certain people working for Home Affairs were refusing to marry couples of the same sex because of their own cultural or religious views. And I remember that opened an entire can of worms. And I think that sometimes in South Africa we hide behind the fact that we've got this constitution that allows everybody to get married, the LGBTQI community. But there are still gaps in the system, and there are still prejudices that we need to guard against. So indeed, there is a very big task ahead. By when are they hoping to complete this very difficult work?
So the Home Affairs is calling it a very long journey. So by 2021, that's when they hope this actually will take into effect. But also, more importantly, the ministry has been very clear that the new act should be guided by 3 elements. So it should respect the human dignity, it should be non-discriminatory, but also, most importantly, there must be an element of equality. So it's going to be really hard to really make sure that they get as much consultation as possible. And we know in South Africa, the lawsuits every now and then, it's always a massive issue if there's an element of exclusion. So now what you're going to see is that over the coming weeks, they will consult with the contra-lesser leaders, but also even the departments. For example, Marcel, one of the major challenges facing the department is the Home Affairs Department will oversee the marriages, but now you have this high divorce rate. So 10 marriages.
What was the statistic you tweeted
so,
earlier?
Exactly. So very staggering. So out of 10 marriages, so 4 don't ever reach the 10-year mark. So that's a very staggering figure, and it really points to the number of challenges we're facing as the society.
Gosh, very interesting stuff. Thank you so much. ENCA's Kailihle Kumalo with the very latest on that story, with Home Affairs Department starting the very difficult job of updating and modernizing South Africa's Marriage Act.